image processing. Medical image processing. She has to credit a number of papers published in a peer-reviewed international journals. She has received different funding agency from DBT, UGC, AICT. She has completed two projects on healthcare as a PI. Currently, she has a two ongoing project as a one PI as well as the co-PI. Total project tune of around 51 lakhs is a credit to her contribution in the research aspects. She also received a MODRAPS funding scheme with a tune of 8 lakhs from AICT, modernizing VLSI laboratory. She used to conduct a lot of staff development program, faculty development program related to medical imaging and healthcare aspects. She has organized a number of conferences, workshops, funded by different funding agencies at a tune of 40 lakhs from AICT, DBT, DST, MOES, ASERB, and UGC, New Delhi. So it is our pleasure to have such a chief guest in the field of electronics and communication related to healthcare industries. So right now the guest is with us. It is once again I welcome Dr. Gaby Jayanti madam for this occasion. So participants are actually this is the first session actually going with the electronic side in the medical imaging side. It helps them for their career aspects. So right now I welcome the diocese for you, ma'am. I like to invite KB Jayanti madam for the presentation. Jayanti ma'am.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ayapadasan, Dr. Ayapadasan, for your very beautiful introduction about me. I'm happy to be associated with this course on research methodology. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Audible,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Can I start the session now?
Yes, ma'am. You can start, ma'am.
Okay. So the topic which was given, good morning to everybody, all the participants here. And actually the topic which was given to me was research. Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Audible.
Hello.
I will. Hello.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ayapadasan.
Thank you.
The topic which was given to me was research in electrical, electronics and communication engineering, which was a very, very vast domain. So I thought I'll tell something in the technology which I am currently working on, and also include certain basics in this particular technology. Why I got my interest in this particular domain and what is happening in the globe in these domains, and then the little basics behind this deep learning, and then if time permits, a few glimpses of the projects which I have done in healthcare. So this is how the presentation is planned for today. So the title I have taken for the presentation is The Research in AI with Deep Learning and Big Data. So artificial intelligence. Everywhere we have data. Any domain you take, we have lot of data, volumes, millions of data which is available. This data is turning the entire world around. Everywhere, even in the situation of COVID, you can see everywhere it is predictions only based on the data. The data is very, very important. It's becoming very important, and playing with the data, we should know certain things in AI so that we can play with the data. And the deep learning intelligence from the big data, it's becoming a very, very important domain which is going to rule the next few years, at least the next 10 years. So the growth of data, you can see right from 2005 to 2015, how the data is exponentially increasing. And also the growth, it has 50x growth from 2010. Initially the data, how it was growing, but after the internet and the smartphones and everything. We have the data volume multiplying and 50 times every year. That's how it's multiplying. Just for your convenience, pie chart is given. What's happening in the 2016 Internet Minute and what's happening in the 2017 Internet Minute. How the data has increased. See, you can see, for example, how the Uber data has increased. The Facebook, Netflix, everything. All these social media which are contributing to the data, it's millions of data which is available, and lot of research is being done on how actually it is not only the marketing, the healthcare, everywhere the data is playing a wonderful part, and there is lot of research opportunities which are into this data. The innovations which will rule the world in technology for the next few years, you can see the largest part is contributed by artificial intelligence, 35.25%, and then it is IoT with 14.75%, and then it is AR and VR. It's with a small percentage of 2.46, and robotics with another 1.64, and then big data with 45.9. So as I have said, it is the artificial intelligence and the big data which are contributing to the greater part of the innovations which are going to rule the world for the next few years. And big data, it is in healthcare. You know, healthcare has got large volumes of data which are totally unmanageable. You can see it as in 2012, it was 500 petabytes, which was 10 billion 4-drawer cabinets, whereas in 2020, it has 25,000. See how many times it has multiplied, totally unimaginable. And we have to work with this data for good predictions. It is not possible for human beings to work with the data. Manually, it is not possible to interpret all these data. So we have lot of research going into this. The amount of worldwide healthcare data is expected to grow 50 times the current total. Current total is 25,000, which has already grown by 50 times and more. And now it is expected to grow by another 50 times. Now, what are the types of data analytics? All these are research domains. You can choose any one domain of your interest. All these data analytics are about. So we have the descriptive data analytics, the predictive data analytics, and the prescriptive data analytics. So what is this descriptive data analytics? Analytics that help you to undertake how things are going. How is it going? That's it. So what is happening, how things are going. A description of that comes under descriptive analytics. When you take the predictive analytics, it helps you to forecast like what's happening in a COVID situation. Take the history of the data, which has happened in the past 3 months, and we try to predict with other countries which are there. We try to predict what is going to happen in our country with the data which is available in our place for the past 2 or 3 months. That's predictive analytics. And prescriptive analytics is that one which suggests a prescribed next step or action. So you also not only predict, but also give a prescription of what can be done next. So these are the 3 ways in which the data analytics can be divided into or can be classified into. We are drowning in a sea of data, no doubt about it. And the applications of big data analytics, as I have told, it goes into the healthcare, it goes into homeland security, the traffic control, manufacturing industry, multi-channel sales, the telecommunication, trading analytics, another domain, which is financially controlled, and then it is also useful in the search quality. So the basic of this, where does it start? It all starts, this artificial intelligence, it all starts with machine learning. So machine learning, what is machine learning? It's a method of data analysis that automates the analytical model building. It's a branch of AI based on the idea that machines should be able to learn and adapt through experience. And it is the science of creating algorithms and programs which learn on their own. The definition as given by Cora is what I have mentioned here. But the machine learning in general, in specific, or whatever we say, whatever we do, whatever we think, we try to make the machine do, and that's machine learning. What is machine learning depends on who you ask. You ask one person, he gives a different answer. So it is nothing but the learning that is done by machines, my lab partner says, and the algorithms that can learn from and make predictions on data. That's what Wikipedia says. Induction and other algorithms that can be said to learn. That's what Google says. And predictive analysis, as Microsoft Azure says. So each one has his or her own definition, or its own definition, I should say. Why do you need machine learning? And that depends on really what you want. What do you want really decides why you want to do machine learning. It can be an engagement, it can be a discovery, it can be a decision, it can be prediction, it can be an analytics, which includes fraud, personalization, marketing, churn, and support. Anything it can be. Now, what are the types of machine learning we have seen? So machine learning is actually classified into three types: supervised, unsupervised, and reinforcement. So supervised machine learning is one where actually you have a task driven process in the it's a task driven process, and unsupervised learning is one where just a second. So unsupervised learning is one where it is data driven, and reinforcement learning is one where the algorithm learns to react to an environment. So in a supervised learning, you need to give guidance. That is, the learning happens only if you are able to train your system with all possible inputs of what is that you are going to test with. As like human beings, when we see something for the first time, we will not be able to recognize it. Say if I've so far not seen an Alexa device. So when I see an Alexa, maybe I've seen it in the photographs, I've seen it on the internet and all those. But personally, I don't have an experience of working with an Alexa device. And when somebody comes and gives me an Alexa device, I'll not be able to identify it for the first time. But when I'm given it for the next time, I'll be definitely able to identify it. So supervised learning is one where I get all the inputs. I'm already trained with all the inputs, which I'm going to test with, and then I do a testing on that. So it is based on the task which is going to be done, whether it is a classification or it is
Ma'am, you can start. We will let you know whether it is audible or not. Participants, please wait for a second. There is a troubleshoot. We are trying to sort out. Trying to connect with my participant.
Participants, please wait for a while. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible right now. Okay.
Thank you.
Ma'am, you can start right now, ma'am.
Hello.
Ma'am, it is audible, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the trouble.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, no problem, ma'am.
So, may I know where I got disconnected actually? The supervised and unsupervised reinforcement, I believe I completed this.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And
Type machine learning.
okay. So the machine learning, actually we have the reinforcement learning. the unsupervised learning and the supervised learning. So this is where we were discussing about. And supervised learning, you have two things to do, as I have told, regression and classification. And unsupervised learning is clustering of data, because it is data driven, it is clustering of data, and then dimensionality reduction, and then reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning is where you learn by mistakes, as I have told you. And this cannot be used in a field where mistakes cannot happen. And all other supervised and unsupervised learning, they do not, you get a good accuracy. And reinforcement learning, of course, gives a better accuracy, but you learn, the algorithm actually learns from mistakes. So this is how it goes actually, how the artificial intelligence, the machine learning and the deep learning are one within the other. You can see the deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and that's a subset of artificial intelligence. Okay, all the three together come, and the big data is a part of both deep learning as well as machine learning. And that is also a part of data mining and data science also. So this is what has happened and why the deep learning is assuming importance these days. What was happening earlier? Earlier, all the algorithms which were available became saturated at one point of time when the amount of data was increasing. As the performance improved, the amount of data, you can see the performance graph, which is shown in red. When the amount of data keeps on increasing, after a particular point, the performance comes to saturation. With more amount of data, that is when you have larger and larger amount of data with all the possibilities, it is quite possible that the performance of the algorithm improves. But rather you can see the line in red, the older learning algorithms, they reached a saturation point and the curve is almost flat. There is no performance improvement after a certain point. But with the advent of deep learning, what has happened is the performance keeps on increasing with the amount of data also increasing. So how do data science techniques scale with the amount of data? We see it here. The graph clearly shows how it is. But why this is happening? What is actually the reason for this? Why is that the older learning algorithms had a flattened performance response, whereas the deep learning algorithms had actually show and exhibit a performance improvement? What is the reason? The base actually comes from the neural network. Before going into the neural network, we will see something about how actually this is happening. So we have certain features. So the machine learning, as I have told you, we will see this basic first. So the machine learning allows the computer to learn on its own based on manual features provided, whereas in deep learning, the algorithms attempt to model high-level abstractions in data to determine a high-level meaning. In machine learning, we had only a single hidden layer, whereas in deep learning, you have multiple hidden layers. And data points we have already discussed. And you have various automated algorithms in the machine learning, whereas the deep learning uses neural network. And all of us, I don't know if all of you know, neural network is one important thing which can actually help the machine think like human. You know, the human brain is made of millions of neurons, and the entire human body is connected to the brain through the neurons. And if you want to do a machine and implicate a machine which is going to think like human being, which is going to work like human being, it is very much important that you work on the neural network. That's very important. And now, when you want to work on the neural network, what does that helps you to identify something? So when you see a book, some feature of the book you try to remember, and when you see the next time, you find out that is a book only because it has the shape of the book, and when you open it, it has pages to flip. So what are the features there? So the book has a cover, the book has a title, the book has an author, and it has some papers. Then you say it is a book. And then when the papers are there, which are blank, then you say it is a notebook where you can write on it, which has printed matter in it. Then you say it is a book which you can read. That's how. So what is that which helps us to identify all this? It is all only the thing we call it as features. So this is what here you see. So when you see a car and a bus, so how do you differentiate a person? There is a person who is there walking on the road, and there are two cars which are parked on the side, and then there is a bus which is going on. So when you take the, you know, by your training for the past years of your existence, that this is a car and this is a bus and this is a human being. So how was that you are going to impart this particular experience which you have in you into the machine? That you have to extract the features. So this is very early for discussion of these features. We'll go again about this later. Now this is what I have told. So feature extraction is done by the human being. So we find out. So what is the feature which is necessary for the machine to identify a book? Maybe a title. The book has a title. It has some colors. Maybe it is also white, and then it has some printed matter in it. So these are the features which we take, and then we try to classify it, and then we try to say it is a book or a not. And the same for a car. So car, what will you take? It is the wheel. So when you take the wheels of the car and then you check if the car has got the features of the car or the wheels. You take one of the feature as a wheel, and then you try to give it as input for this neural network. The network similar to our brain to learn when there are wheels, then the object which you see is a car. But is that sufficient? No, we'll come to it at a later point. Now, the basic difference between machine learning and deep learning is that you try to extract the features and you give the features to the machine to learn. Whereas in deep learning, you can see the features are not given by the human being, or it is not given manually, whereas it is done by the network itself. That is the difference between machine learning and deep learning. The human part here is actually replaced by the machine. Hello, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll see. What are the importance of these features? What features might you expect a good neural network to learn when trained with the data like this? Now, this is the data which is given. It's nothing but the handwritten digits from US postal envelopes. Now here, you have to train the neural network. What is that you are going to train with? What are the features or that you are going to take? Can somebody give any suggestions on this? Any feature you are just given to train a neural network to identify the digits 0 to 9. The features which are given can be the vertical lines. One feature, right? The arrows are positioned slightly different. So the vertical line here, it is the 1, and here the 4, and then for 9, the vertical line. So vertical lines is one feature. What next? Horizontal line. Horizontal lines are the other features. So you have to tell the neural network to train with the vertical lines, the
कैसे आप
horizontal lines.
मशीन को ओके मशीन को रीड आउट कैसे कराते हैं?
And the next one is the small circles. So as far as the digits 0 to 9 are concerned, these are three features which you can train your neural network with. The vertical line. So this is a vertical line, and this is a horizontal line, and you have small circles. Apart from this, you have also curves which are there, and you have the curves in the opposite direction also. Now, is it good if you train your neural network with only these three, the vertical lines, the horizontal lines, and the small circles. Is it good if you train your neural network with all these three? No, that's not sufficient. The small circle, it can be here, it can be on the top, and it can be on this side. It can be on the right, on your right side. It can be on your left side. It can be on the top. It can be on the bottom, and then it can be on your left bottom, and it can be only one. So what does this show? This show the position invariance. So you just need more than one layer of the neural network to train. So if you train one particular neural network with only identifying the vertical lines in whichever position they are, or the horizontal lines in whichever position they are, and these small circles in whichever position they are. But then the position invariance needs another neural network. Why is it so? Multiple layers make sense. Why is it so? Because the brain works in that way, right? You need a layer to identify the pixels, and you need another layer to identify the edge detectors, and then you have the shape detectors, and then you have the higher level visual cortex abstractions. So this is what you could see here in the previous slide. You can see the low level features. It is just only the lines, the vertical lines, the horizontal lines, the diagonal lines, all those things. And the next you have another mid-level features. After these lines, you have something extra to identify. These are the other level of features. And then you see the high level features which give the final shape for the object to be trained. So this is actually your raw data. You have so much of features to be extracted. Now, what happens? So far in machine learning, as we have discussed, only one neural network layer was there, and that layer was not sufficient to identify all these features. The algorithm simply did not work on multi-layer architectures. All the weight learning algorithms had only one hidden layer. And what happens if you increase one more hidden layer? One more layer that which could get trained on it? What would actually happen? It took a lot of time for training, and the network got hanged up because the resources were not sufficient. The processor speed was not sufficient. But now I learned artificial intelligence and neural networks way back in 1994 as my elective, artificial intelligence and expert systems. And I learned neural networks also. But then nobody spoke about artificial intelligence. It was only in the paper, and then everybody forgot about artificial intelligence. But now see, the entire world is speaking about artificial intelligence. What has made this possible? I think you know about the GPUs. I don't know how many of you are technology people here. GPUs, or graphical processing units, which actually were initially used for the purpose of gaming actually. So because gaming was seen to be a one domain which was a very big business for many people, people started finding or inventing processes with high speed. And it was only because of this gaming domain GPUs came. But then it was started to apply in neural networks, and then it was seen they gave the results were really astonishing, and that is where the deep learning and the artificial intelligence have started to come back, say after 25 years. This is not a very new field. It's an old field, but it is being now supported with a technology which is very new. I should say not even the technology, it is the processor which is making it possible now. So when you give any number of hidden layers, when you give any number of inputs, earlier with a single neural network, when you give images for training itself, images, how much of space it occupies. Even when you give images for training, the network gets hanged up. it is always possible to work with a network only with the data which is possible. See here, this is how you have to differentiate. Supposing you have two things to be classified, what is this? And this falls like one is blue and one is yellow. You don't have a straight line of linear separation is not possible here, because you have this yellow and blue dots mixed up. So you have to find out some other learning which can exactly separate this yellow and blue dots. And that's how we have come into deep learning, the new way to train multi-layer neural networks. How does it happen? You try to train this layer first, and then you train the next layer, and then you train the next layer, and then the next. That's how it goes. And finally, the output layer. Basically, it is forced to learn the good features that describe from what comes from the previous layer. That's very, very important. It is mainly the features which are taken from this layer has to support for the features which are decided in this layer. So you can't identify a book as a notebook because both are looking similar when covered. And you can't identify a notebook as a book. So what is very important for any identification or any classification purpose is only the feature. The very important thing is the feature. So what exactly is deep learning? What is that I'm talking to you about? I'm talking to you about neural networks. I'm talking to you about features. I'm talking to you about layers and all this. Let me put it in short. So far, if anybody has felt it vague, this is how it is going to be. So what exactly is this deep learning? It means a neural network. It's a simple neural network, right? We all know the backpropagation network, the SVM, whatever it is. It's a simple neural network, but with several layers of nodes between the input and the output. It's not the single layer. And why is it generally better than the other methods on image, speech, and certain other types of data? Why is it better? It is better because we need not identify the feature, because it is felt as human beings we may make mistakes in identifying the features. So here it is the series of layers. Why is it generally better? It is better because of the number of layers between the input and the output, which do this feature identification and processing in a series of stages, just as our brain seems to be. As I've told you in the previous picture, how the brain works in layers. The first layer, it just tries to seize, identifies, oh, what is it? What does it look like? It's a pixel. And then you try to find out the edge, because it is always the edge which gives the shape of any object. And then you go into the primitive shape detectors. And after that, you go for higher level of abstraction. So each of this, you need to give one separate layer, one different layer. So minimum 4 hidden layers. So that's how it works. The series of layers between the input and the output, which do the feature identification and processing in a series of stages, just as our brain seems to be. Now, multi-layer neural networks, I have told you, multi-layer neural networks have been around for 25 years. Now, what's actually new? What is actually new? What is actually new? We have always had good algorithms for learning the weights and networks with one hidden layer, right? This multi-layer neural networks is always have the hidden layer is only one. So it'll have the input layer, the hidden layer, and the output layer. All your backpropagation networks, SVMs, DCNs, everything, they all have only one single neural hidden layer, one single hidden layer. And these algorithms are not good at learning the weights for the networks with more hidden layers. Now, what happens when you introduce more hidden layers? It is the learning the weight. So what do you mean by the weight? I should say, the first time when I'm given something complex to identify, and the next time when I'm given with the same object, an identical object, then it is okay. Otherwise, what happens? It could be this or it could be that. Now, what is the proportionality I am applying? The probability which I am applying, the object which I am going to see is this. 50%, Okay, I'll take. So when I'm shown something like this, it should be only this product or this object which I have in my memory. So that's the 50% probability. Now when I'm given the next time the same object and I identify it correctly, now my weight increases, say from 50 to 75%. No, it is not the same. It's a different product. Now what happens? I have to reduce the probability. Now these are the probabilities which are reflected in the weights. So how much of weight am I going to assign for getting these features? Whatever features I have taken for identifying the book, it is the length. It has to be, it can be a rectangle. It can be a square. Now, if I'm taking that as the feature, if that is the feature which is given, is it correct? That feature is okay for me? If that feature is okay for me to identify the next time I'm given it, okay, I can give it a larger weight. Now that feature is not sufficient for me. Then I have to reduce the weight of it. The probability that of certain things which help me to understand or identify a particular object goes straight into the weights for the neural network. See, this is how it goes. The object detection. So it says the object, this is the object. Now, how am I identifying? It's a stapler, actually, a desktop stapler. Now, what happens? See, the low level vision features. First, I try to see this, and then I try to recognize, yes, this is the object which I know. Now we see this, a motorbike. I know it, a motorbike. Now, how does a machine tell that this is a motorbike? What is that I see? I see only this, definitely. But what does the machine see? It sees only this. It sees only the numbers. Now, how will I tell the machine to identify? I should find the exact features. I cannot say the red color. I cannot say the wheel. I cannot say this. Something else which is unique for the motorbike. I have to choose it. The wheels are not sufficient, right? The wheels are important, but the wheels are not sufficient for the machine to learn. Now I have to choose the correct feature. So if you want to target, whenever you see the machine to target as a motorcycle, you have to search, do an image search. Typical goal for pattern recognition is this. And then it can be a speech recognition, or it can be some other text which is there. Anything can be searched, anything can be identified. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's a text, maybe it is an audio. Anything can be found out, and you can have it as in your output. But one thing is very important. What are the features you take for training, and give it to this ML or the machine learning algorithm so that it gives you the right tag when it comes out of the search engine. That's very important. So how do you do it? How do you extract the features? And when will you extract the features? How many features need to be extracted? And what are the features which are needed to be extracted? And how the features need to be organized? So it is collect the data, choose the features, you learn the algorithm, you train the classifier, and then you evaluate the classifier. Data collection is very important. You cannot train the network only with the books. You should always train with something else so that when something else is shown, it should at least identify that it is not a book. When you train the machine with one form of data, it becomes biased. Like, it's just like human cognition, where actually you are in one place and you are trying to one particular language. You keep hearing whatever it is, whether it is Tamil or Hindi or Telugu or whatever it is. And when you are given something else, some other language, you don't even know what is that you are hearing. So when you train it with some other language like Telugu, or supposing you are training it with Tamil, and then you also give some other data like Telugu or your Malayalam or Hindi, whatever it is, the machine will be able to identify what is given as not Tamil. Otherwise, it may get hanged up. Like, whatever you hear, you should at least know, is it someone who is speaking Tamil differently, or is it a different language? That much is needed. So data collection is very, very important, that you try to give all possible data, and then you try to train your network, and then you test the network with whatever you want. And when you choose the features, I think I've already spoken much on the features. What is that which actually identify a feature is very, very important. So that you should always be able to extract correctly, and then give it to the exact learning algorithm. And then you train your classifier, and then with the output you get from the classifier, you evaluate whether your classifier is good or not, or it has to be remodeled again. So how do you extract the features? The features can be application dependent. So when you are trying to train your network with a character, the character like we saw in the previous slide, the handwritten digits of the US envelope, right? You have to talk about shape features. And when it is medical images, definitely it's again shape features, because I'll tell you, you need to identify a lesion or something else which is not actually a part of the organ which is there, or the organ has deformed its shape. In either case, when something external or a foreign body is sitting inside your human body, foreign organ is sitting inside your human body, or it is the shape of the body has changed, whatever it is, you need a shape feature. And then the texture features. What is that which has changed in your body? That can be told only with the texture features. And then you want to identify a text application, you want to identify some text. Now, frequency of the word occurrence, how frequently the particular word occurs. And then speech, it is MEL frequency coefficient. So these are a few examples actually. So if you want to do this application, these are the features you can take. These are only suggestions, these are not final. Depending upon your exact application, you have to fine tune your future to get 100% accuracy. And so the 100% accuracy is not received in any of the application. And that's why still research is going on in this domain and in all the domains. So when will you extract the features? Very important. It's after understanding the patterns, and it is domain specific. Where are you going to apply? Depending upon that, you have to choose the feature. How many features? Again, as many possible features. And what features need to be extracted? You have to decide. Application dependent. Feature engineering is most time consuming, very, very time consuming. You select some features and then you understand this feature is not sufficient because the network doesn't give a good output. And then you train to fine tune it, nothing wrong in it. So feature engineering is really, really tough. And that is one reason why deep learning came. As I have told in the beginning, you need not select the feature. Now, what is that you're going to do with the same motorbike which has come back again? Why is this hard? Why is this feature engineering hard? See, looking at a motorbike, can't you say it's a motorbike? No, you can say, but how will the machine tell? I have told you it sees only the numbers. Now, how will I tell? Now, with these numbers, I try to identify a car and a motorcycle. You have to tell the learning algorithm. Now, these are the parts I'm identifying. What is that I'm identifying? Here, I have a wheel, and here I have another wheel. So I try to identify the values of these wheels, the raw image. So whatever comes is a motorbike, and whatever minus, it is a non-motorbike. It's only from the pixel value. Pixel value, I forgot to tell you. These are the pixel values. At every point, whenever you ask the machine to read, see, these values are not the values of this entire motorbike, I tell you. You see here a red color box, a very small box. The values in this box are only red here. This small box, a very small portion of this motorbike can return a matrix of such a large value. Then you can imagine what will this motorbike return when read in a computer. That is what I call it as a pixel or a picture element. Each picture element. I think pixel is a common term, you know, because in cameras everybody uses like 4.4 megapixel, 14.4 megapixel, 14 megapixel, 20 megapixel. The more the number of pixels or the picture elements, the clarity or the resolution keeps on increasing. So the pixel elements per unit size. So in this area you have so many picture elements. With increasing pixel resolution, the number of values here keeps on increasing. And you know what happens when the number of values keep on increasing? What happens? The computational complexity keep increasing. See the motorbikes, non-motorbikes, all these given minus. Now, still you are able to separate what does that which is helping you finally for the motorbike. It is not only the wheel, it is not some other portion, right? The very unique feature of a motorbike is a handlebar. So the feature which you select must have a handlebar in it. Otherwise, you can be very, very definite that your classification will not give you proper results. I think I made this point very clear. If you understand this particular point, you will understand the importance of learning the features and training the features. That's why we go deep for learning the features. Now you can see from the pixels where you go to the edges, and from the edges then you go for the next combination of edges, and after this you try to go for the object models. These is how you have to extract the features and give them for training. A very complex feature engineering process. Now, this is what we expect by the machines. Can it happen? Yes. So that is how we have the earlier thing I have told you: supervised, unsupervised, semi-supervised, reinforcement, and deep learning. And you have a lot of methods also available here. For want of time, I think I'm skipping all this, and you can actually have the slide. I'll ask the organizer to share the slide with you. So supervised learning, you give all possible images of the car. You can see all possible images of the car and then test it only with the car, not test with anything else. You train it fully with the cars, all cars, and then you train only with the motorcycles, and then you train it with test it with the motorcycle. Semi-supervised learning, you don't label anything, you just give. Here you actually label. You label the car as a car, and you label the motorcycle as a motorcycle. You tell a car has these features, and you tell the motorcycle is a label as motorcycle. So when the machine learns, what will happen is, whenever the motorcycle input is given for learning, it will take it and put it in the motorcycle label. And when car is given for learning, it will take it and put it in the car label. But when you given a semi-supervised learning, you don't label it, you just give the images. You just give the motorcycle and the cars together, and both are being given for learning, and every possible image has to be given. That's very, very important. And then you test it with either a car or with a motorbike, and you ask what is this, then your network will be able to tell. And then you give self-taught learning is you have different algorithms. So how do they differ? Let me tell a few things about it. And then supervised is backpropagation, autoencoders, Boltzmann machines, all this. Unsupervised, again, it is self-organizing map, hierarchical clustering, and partitional clustering. And semi-supervised or graph-based methods. So when you use these methods in your learning algorithm, then your training network comes under one of those. That's how it goes. So self-taught learning, you give random images from the internet. They are neither car nor motorcycle. So learning the feature hierarchies is your deep learning. From here to here, from here to here, and then to the next level, and then to the next level. You need to follow a hierarchy. So when I take an elephant, so my lowest level of hierarchy has got only lines, maybe vertical, horizontal, anything. and then you have curved lines, and then you have little different, and then you have the final feature coming. Easier to monitor what is being learned and to guide the machine to better subspaces. This is how it goes. When you choose this and choose this. Phases, examples of learned object paths from object categories. You see actually how this is happening for different objects phases. For cars, what's happening? For elephants, what is happening? And for chairs, what is happening? When you see in the lowest level of abstraction, actually you do not differentiate any feature here. Almost all the features look the same, whether it is a phase or it is a car or it's an elephant or it is a chair. The lowest level of abstraction is the same. Now, where do you see the difference? Few differences happen in the mid-level of abstraction, and very big differences you can see in the highest level of abstraction. This learning is happening only in deep learning because for every learning or every feature, you have a separate layer which is given. And that is what we started in the beginning. Machine learning has got only one hidden layer, whereas deep learning has got as many hidden layers as possible. See, what is learned in the first layer is shown in blue, right? And the entropy, what is that? Information content in it is how is it happening? And then the second layer and the third layer. So the information content, you see, it is actually reversing with the conditional entropies, right? So it is necessary that you have all these features, very important. You can't simply straight away go into this feature, or you cannot stop here. That is not possible. It is this graph, it clearly shows how both are very important. Now, this is actually the idea behind deep learning, the process behind deep learning. Now, I told you in the beginning that these things, the basics, though not many hidden layers, few hidden layers were available. One hidden layer was available, and then few hidden layers came up. I told you it is only with the advent of GPUs and the processors it is made possible. Now, what are these processes? It is purely technical. It is not the science which is involved. What are the processes which are involved here? All these are open source. It is the first ever deep network architecture, AlexNet. You can Google it and search for it. And the coding for this, everything is available in open source. As far as deep learning architectures are concerned, if you are not good at technology and if you are not good at architecture, you can straight go into any one of these networks. Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am, you can continue, ma'am.
Okay. AlexNet is one. And the other one is VGGNet, which is AlexNet was the first network, actually, first deep network architecture, which classified 1,000 possible categories and no standard filter size is used. It consisted of 8 layers. And then you have the VGGNet, the Visual Graphics Group. This was done by Oxford. With every network which was developed, this is all architecture and it is purely technical. The convolutional layers, the pooling layers, the auto encoders, the deconvolution layers, everything. So, but you need not worry in the beginning if you don't know any of this. You can straightly go into some programming with the TensorFlow and then use it with the any of the networks. All these networks are ready-madely available. GoogleNet, it was developed by Google for its own purpose, but this is also made public. And you can see it has got 22 layers deep. I'll tell you. So this has got only 8 layers. This is the very big important specification which we were talking about. The number of layers, the number of layers, the number of layers. See, AlexNet has got 8 layers. How many layers the VGGNet has got? 19 layers. Definite advantage. The GoogleNet, it has got 22 layers deep. And the accuracy it gets is 93.3%, top 5 accuracy in ImageNet. ImageNet, what is ImageNet? I'll tell you. And these is how actually it works. You have the one convolutional layers, and it can be any number of convolutions. It can be, the filter size can be 3 cross 3, 5 cross 5, 1 cross 1. I'm not sure if I'm using certain technology terms like filters, convolutions, and all those things. They are actually basic mathematics also. And if at all anything you need to work on this and you need some clarification on this, you can contact me at a later point of time, because if I start explaining this, I'll not be able to complete. So there's Google Net. So convolution layer, the pooling layer, the softmax layer, and other layers are there. So here, what is this Google Net and what is this ImageNet? ImageNet is one important international classification process which has been happening globally, and where lot of people working on deep learning and artificial intelligence usually participate, train their network with thousands of images which are available in ImageNet, and then try to classify them. And the better the classification, the more the deeper the network. That is how it actually goes. Suitable for image classification and localization task. Each network has got a different thing. I had a slide on ImageNet and actually I'm searching for that. Maybe I'll see it at a later point of time and I'll share it with you. And now what are the software frameworks? Now these are the architectures. Now I have to program these architectures. They can be, it can be anything. Cafe, Minerva, Keras, all these are software networks, and I was telling you about TensorFlow. Theano is there, Torch is there, and all these are open sources. You need not buy anything. Everything is available on the internet. Now, what is this key issue in future learning is the scaling up. You have to, this is what I've told you, the NVIDIA GPU. So with the Intel CPU, what has happened in the LOPS and what has happened in NVIDIA, you can see the more the number of LOPS, the more the performance keeps on increasing. See the processes. This is the competition I was telling you about. ILS VRC top 5 error on ImageNet. You can see the error will actually keeps on decreasing. Error is what? The error is actually in identifying the image which is given for classification. That is actually the error. And you can see here, the error keeps on decreasing. All this is only due to the deep learning network architecture. So the AI funding, you can see it keeps on increasing. Again, it's a very good increase. The global quarterly AI funding is increasing. You can see growth of deep learning. And this is the ImageNet classification I was talking to you about. The first use of deep learning, the error has started to decrease. The classification error rate, you can see from 30%, it has come down to less than 10% with the use of deep learning. So you have to train your network with all these images which are given in the ImageNet, and then you should be able to classify. This is a competition which is happening yearly, and all those who are working on AI and deep learning participate on this. The more shallow the network, the more the error. The more the deeper the network, you can see the error, how much it reduces. So the deep learning is, it is not only in research, it is not only in PPTs, it is not only in publications, it is also being used in day-to-day life. A farmer who is in Australia, who has done a classification of cucumber to help his parents who are very old aged to sort the cucumber. You can just give the title in the net and you can see how this works. The entire system is actually described. Classification of skin lesions, hot condition diagnosis, and the classification of clothes. Everything and anything can be classified for that matter. AI with deep learning is the new electricity. Just as 100 years ago, electricity transformed industry after industry. Now AI is doing the same. So this is all about AI. Now I would like to know whether, and few more research applications in healthcare I would like to share, but these are available on the net. Path AI is an accurate cancer diagnosis with AI, where the machine learning technology is used to assist the pathologists in making more accurate diagnosis. And these people are working with drug developers, Bristol Myers Squibb and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with AI technology. Beyond Health, an intelligent symptom checker. Diagnose and treat illness again, where you have a chatbot that listens to the patient's symptoms and health concerns, then guides that patient to correct care based on its diagnosis. And then you have Analytic AI deep learning for actionable insights. It's a radiology diagnosis. Takes unstructured medical data, right? And the radiology images, blood tests, EKGs, electrocardiograms, genomics, patient medical, everything, and gives the doctors a better insight into a patient's real-time needs. And it is the fifth smartest AI intelligence company. That's how the world ranks it, above Facebook and Microsoft. And then Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, diagnostic deadly blood diseases faster. 25,000 images of blood samples were taken and the machines were taught to search for bacteria. And you can see it is 95% accuracy. And this is Harvard University's teaching hospital. And Bioxyl Therapeutics, pharmaceutical development, immuno-oncology and neuroscience. Most innovative healthcare AI developments of 2019 is the certificate which is given to them. Not only this, you have a lot of people who are working in healthcare, a number. And when I talk about healthcare, I shouldn't miss John Hopkins. But John Hopkins is not only in healthcare, they have tried to use AI for hospital management, predictive AI technique to improve the efficiency of patient operational inflow. And they say there is 60% improvement in its ability to admit patients and 21% increase in patient discharges before noon, resulting in a faster and more positive patient experience. But John Hopkins is well known for using AI technology. I have taken this because this is something which is in healthcare, but is not exactly the healthcare. It is hospital management. And with this, I end my presentation on deep learning. And if at all the participants need, or if you have time, I can share my research presentation. Otherwise, it is time for questions. Thank you. Whatever you say, I can proceed for the next few minutes. The participants, you have something to tell.
Ma'am, proceed for next few minutes, ma'am.
Okay. So I don't have any questions now on this.
Then let them ask after some 11:30, ma'am. You can have some time on next presentation, ma'am.
Now this I cannot anyway. I can do it only from say some 5 to 10 minutes because it's all my research project. I'll just give a glimpse of what's happening, whatever I have done. So my area of research I have taken is cardiovascular diseases, a computational tool for early detection of abnormalities, both cardiovascular diseases and birth defects. So as far as cardiovascular diseases is concerned, I started working in 2009 and I had an initial project in 2010. And those days, deep learning, artificial intelligence, all things were not available. I was just trying to do some classification based on the neural networks, which was known to me at that time, because I had I did my thesis with the help of neural network, which is once again a classification, and then I have also studied neural networks in my PG, which had some importance. So actually, I started working on this cardiovascular diseases. So it is one thing I should say the problem was given to me by a doctor friend of mine, and he wanted to automate, and that's how I got into all this carotid artery and all those things, because I was not having absolutely any idea of what this carotid artery is all about, what this vascular aging is all about, and all those things. But the objective of the project was to find out the structural and functional property of the common carotid artery. The carotid artery, I'll tell you what it is, but the objective is to find the structural and the functional parameters. Structural is diameter and functional is elasticity and elastic artery, and to maintain a database for the subjects with successful aging. Aging is one important parameter. I felt a lot of people are dying with heart attack. So this cardiovascular thing has got something with the aging. Even younger people are dying. And in a country like India, where it is not possible to go for an ultrasound scan for a pregnant mother, even during the entire 9 months of period, I did not want to resort to all these advanced modalities of medical imaging like CT and MRI, and I chose it to be an ultrasound image, and that's how I started working on these healthcare projects. What is that could be done? To train a system to predict the vascular age of a person. So vascular age is the age which is given by the artery which is inside, and actual age is the chronological age of a person calculated from the year of my birth. Both have to be the same. The vascular age I predict should be the same as the chronological age. Then the person is healthy. Now, if the vascular age is less, it's good. But when the vascular age is more, it's really a point of alarm for the person. So this is the carotid artery, the one which is shown in red, the external carotid artery, which connects actually, the artery connects the heart to the brain. That's how it goes. And whenever the deposits happen inside the artery, what happens is the diameter of the artery gets reduced, as well as the elasticity of the artery get reduced. Both get reduced. So when this is when I'm trying to automate an algorithm to find out the diameter, the inner wall diameter, which reduces, and the elasticity of the artery, then I will be able to tell the vascular aging of the person. So this is the medical ultrasound image of the artery in the transversal view I have taken. And this is the longitudinal view. We have taken a few frames pertaining to the systole, at least 2 to 3 systoles and diastoles, and then we try to extract the boundary of the artery, segmented the output. I used some technical things, filters, low pass, high pass, all this thresholding, found out the boundary, used some Haar wavelet decomposition, and finally extracted the boundary, which actually shows the intima media thickness, the thickness which is inside the artery. That is a dangerous thing to start with. When it keeps building up, then you get heart disease at a later point of time. And I was also trying to plot this as a graph to find out the elasticity. The distance with every frame, you can see an up and down. The up and down actually show that in a diastole and in a systole, the artery actually enlarges and shrinks. When it shrinks, it reduces, and when it enlarges, it increases. So with the different age groups, we found out the maximum and the minimum diameter, and then we found the alterations of the CCA with the age group, the distension. I didn't take the elasticity. You need a formula to multiply. I took the exact value which I measured, and that you call it as a distension. The change in the wall thickening of the wall size of the artery. The change in the diameter of the artery, I call it as a distension. And what is the maximum diameter and minimum diameter? And the procedure is repeated. And then I trained my neural network. It's a simple BPN. That was what was available then. Collect the data, train the ANN, test the ANN. I had only one hidden layer. This is what I have been telling through the presentation. Collecting the data, training, one hidden layer, input and output layer. And then this is the process I used. And I converged also. So the input training pattern for various age groups are decided. 50 inputs are taken for training the network, and remaining are taken as test patterns. I cannot take more inputs also, right? Just remember this number. I've taken only 50 inputs. Just remember this network also. I've taken only one hidden layer. Okay. Why, I'll tell you later. The diameter and distension measured for different age groups do not have well-defined boundaries, and hence more iterations were needed for convergence. And we were able to successfully classify the healthy subjects, and tell the people who were to meet the cardiologist for a second opinion. And the next was of human chromosomes. And this has got nothing to do, this again we used only neural networks for classification, and chromosomal abnormalities are very important to help the fetus come out to reduce the prenatal mortality. Otherwise you have lot of problems. I'm just running through this. Chromosomal abnormalities. Karyotyping is very important. It is an automated karyotyping which is actually available. The machine is available, but the cost is too high. And we have in India only 2 machines available in karyotyping. For entire population of India, 2 machines are nothing. You have to arrange them. These are the chromosomes, 23 pairs of chromosomes. And the chromosomes have to be arranged and then found out whether there is anything missing, whether there is any structural difference, something is broken, and all these contribute to the growth of the baby inside the womb. I've not given much details about this particular project. And then the data analytics on CVDs is the current one which is going on. So for this actually, we were trying to use actually the study design. We developed a CNN, right? We developed a CNN, and you know how many convolutional layers we had? We had actually 10 convolutional layers, and apart from that we had 5 max pooling layers, and it was approximately everything together, they were coming around 18 layers. Compared to my first work which had only one hidden layer, here I had 18 layers. And then with 50 input images which I have trained my network here with 800 images. It is more than 10 times, and I was able to get a better output. So that is how CNN works. CNN, the more the input in a neural network, the more the input you give for training, the network gets collapsed. It actually saturates. You don't get a good output. The reverse happens in a CNN. The more the input you give in a CNN, the more it learns. The more, the better the output it gives. And you need not select the feature. The CNN selects the features on its own. Of course, it has a drawback, but if anybody finds out what is the drawback of having the CNN takes the features on its own, we'll discuss about it definitely. And thank you for the opportunity given. I would like to thank Dr. Ponmurugan, who has initially invited me, and my sincere thanks to Dr. Maithili Nyanamangai, who has been with this presentation process and earlier for making this presentation happen successfully with all the difficulties, and Dr. Ayyapadasan for a good introduction, and I think it is Dr. Purnima who is there on the background. Thank you all for your support in making this presentation happen successfully. Any questions? I'm ready to take.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request the participants, if you have any queries, you can use the expertise of Dr. Jayanti, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, you have presented a wonderful presentation, ma'am.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Is this audible, ma'am?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you. Thank you.
Ma'am, regarding data sets, how do you get this healthcare data sets, ma'am?
That is one difficult thing which is next to impossible in India. If you have to go about for an Indian data set and you want to work on real data, it is actually next to impossible with all your ethical committee screening running behind hospitals. The first project I did not have much difficulty because I was suggested by one person from Chennai, and he himself gave me the data. But this last project, guess me, I would have run across the state at least for more than 20 hospitals and trying to get the data. with the help of the support and the payment of DBT, but still data is one thing which is very, very tough in India, medical data. But you have data sets available in the web, but they are not real data. You have synthetic data sets available on the net.
Ma'am, have you tied up with a healthcare institution or healthcare academy, something like that?
No, I'm tied. Actually, for this project, we are tied up with few hospitals. After a Herculean task, we were able to tie up with few hospitals with both personal and official influences. But still, the data is being paid actually. Only under payment we are able to get the data.
Including suggestions also, ma'am. If you want to discuss something, then we have to use their expertise, and they have to spend time with us. Everything.
Yeah, that you can have some personal people. If you have, then it helps. But if you do not have any personal people, then it's really tough. You need to find out the person in medicine. There are people, I should say, because only with the support of those people I have made this possible. There are people who have an inclination towards research apart from their practice. If we are able to spot them, the people who have an inclination towards research apart from practice, then they are the gold mines for us. I would place here on due to people who have been with us in the past few years, helping us through this. Not for money. They were helping us only because of their interest in research.
Exactly, ma'am. Ma'am, one more question, ma'am. Ma'am, you got so many funded projects, right, ma'am?
Yes.
Congratulations for that, ma'am. All the best for getting so many things in the future also. One thing I want to ask is, ma'am, while you are applying for projects, what are the things we have to consider to make it as a best successful projects, ma'am? I mean project proposals when you are applying for any funding agencies.
Don't write a single word in the proposal without understanding it. Every word you put in the proposal, you should know why the word is there, how you are going to do it, and what is that you are going to do. If you know this what, how, and why of your proposal, then it will be a definite success. None of the project is a collaborative project here. We applied it on our own. Few faculty in the department, we applied the first initial project, the second one, the third one, all done by us. It is not because of the collaboration that we got the project. We got the project only because of the merit of it. And the third project, I did not even go for a presentation in DBT. It is the third project. This is the ongoing project in DBT. Only with the merit of the project it was given. But every single word you put in the project proposal, you should know why you have put that word there, what that word actually means, and how you are going to do with that word. That's important.
Ma'am,
did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Exactly, ma'am. Ma'am, one more thing, ma'am. Ma'am, when we are applying that, we should have some publication related to that, right, ma'am?
The first project actually.
So some people are.
The first project actually, I did
Yes.
not have. Yeah, I had a publication. Yes, for everything we had publications. One thing is very important regarding the publications. Please go only for publications which are peer reviewed and known to everyone. I have all my publications only in Springer, elsewhere, IET, only in those, not in any of the IJ stuff. I'm sorry to say, but that is very important because I have felt it personally when I went for my chromosomes project. I was asked only a few questions in the presentation. Do you have publications? I gave the list. How many of them are paid? Then my ego got hit. I told I have, you can check it. None of it is paid. All are done by me and all are peer reviewed journals. And then did you go abroad? Have you gone abroad? Yes, I went abroad for a few conferences for presenting papers. Actually, I would say those conferences helped me to propose my projects. I would say that the second project I got in the presentation was only the main part of it is my publications and my travel abroad, because only those things they were telling. I told actually, if you don't give me a research scholar, I don't want this project. I told straight on them and I came. But in spite of it, the project was given before I landed back in Coimbatore. So publications are very, very important, and please go for high impact factor, peer reviewed publications and good publishers. That's important.
Ma'am, is there any impact factor level? Some people are saying that it should be more than 2, something like that, ma'am.
No. Nothing about impact factor level. The publication should be from a good publisher. That's very important. And the confidence with which you appear for the discussion when they call you for a discussion, that matters. And the confidence comes
Thanks a
when you know
lot.
everything in your proposal. Yeah, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, for any further help, if we contact you, please help me, ma'am.
Definitely.
Because I am an R&D coordinator working in Vivekananda College of Engineering for Women, ma'am.
Okay.
I am Tamil Risi, working in Vivekananda Institution, ma'am. Nearby our institution only, ma'am.
Okay.
So please, if any help I contact you, please keep supporting me in guiding everything, ma'am.
Definitely.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Hope ma'am has cleared about some difficult questions regarding project applications and all. If there is any other question, participants can come forward, or else we can close the session and we can start the next session. Speaker is also on the second speaker is also on the line. I think there is no more questions, ma'am. Thank you, Jayanti ma'am. Thank you for your
Thank you.
presence here, and thank you for your expertise that you have shared with us today. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Maithili. Thank you for the wonderful coordination.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks. Participants, please stay on the line. And our next speaker is also waiting. We can start with a few seconds. Once we have check up with the